Welcome to Regulatory Ramblings. Our podcast today is brought to you by the University of Hong Kong's RegTech Lab, the HKU SCF Fintech Academy, the Asia Global Institute, and HKU edX's Professional Certificate in Fintech, with support from the university's Faculty of Law. I'm your host, Ajay Shamdasani. Our topic today is the new book called The AI-fication of Jobs by Huy Nguyen Trieu. He is the co-founder, along with Huy Nguyen, of the Center for Finance, Technology, and Entrepreneurship, or CFTE, as it's better known, a global body that's making waves and making an impact. As a leading voice in the world of AI, Huy's book is the product of 10 months of effort, and it debuted at the recent Singapore Fintech Festival in early November. It explores how artificial intelligence is reshaping the workforce, moving beyond the common question of, will AI take my job? Huy provides a structured framework for understanding AI's impact, from displacement to augmentation, and how such changes and trends can be leveraged for future success and insights. It's an accessible, future-focused guide, and a must-read for anyone who's interested in AI's role in shaping careers, industries, and society. I believe the book is available on Amazon.com now. As Huy puts it, quote, AI is a complex personal topic. 85% of workers believe it will significantly impact their jobs, but understanding what it means is often confusing, end quote. As for himself, Huy is an engineer by training and an entrepreneur by nature. As a quote-unquote big-picture person, he's interested in the tech revolution that's transforming finance, what he calls disruptive finance. Quote, Huy, put simply, we are facing a Napster moment. Technology is set to revolutionize finance, which in turn will massively impact the global economy, business, and society, end quote. His passion is in building and growing businesses, especially in changing environments. It's a path that's led him from being a tech CEO in New York to a managing director in London of investment banks to being a founding partner of an accelerator in Hong Kong, and now co-founder of a global knowledge platform in Fintech. Previously, Huy had been a managing director at Citi, where he grew a business that helped Europe's largest insurance companies, major pension funds, and international banks adapt to an increasingly complex environment. But he has a love for teaching, and it scaled. Having co-created some of the largest Fintech courses in the world for Oxford University's Saïd School of Business, the University of Hong Kong, and Imperial College in London, and now CFTE. As the chief executive of the Disruptive group, he's developing a firm that builds innovative finance businesses with a strong leverage on technology, and he advises CEOs of large organizations. One of TDG's projects is CFTE. As Huy puts it, quote, CFTE is the answer to a very simple question. As a professional in financial services, how do I acquire the skills to be future-proof? The question is simple. The solution is hard, because there is much knowledge to acquire. The industry is changing constantly, and professionals don't have the time to learn. Together with hundreds of experts, from heads of innovations in banks to CEOs of challenger banks and fintech venture capital firms, we have created a platform that helps the industry acquire this knowledge quickly, from fintech to artificial intelligence to open banking. CFTE is based in London, Singapore, Hong Kong, and Abu Dhabi, and works with most Tier 1 financial institutions, end quote. And with that, I turn over to the man, the legend himself, Huy. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Ajay, and hello, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be on this podcast. Thanks a lot for this very comprehensive biography. So I think you said it all pretty much. No? It was really good just to listen back to some of the things that I did. And very, very big pleasure for me to be on the podcast of HKU. I've had the pleasure to work with Hong Kong University for a long time now, and always impressed by what you do.
And we appreciate your friendship and support. And honestly, I from what I've spoken to people, that your biography is accomplished as it is. It really, and I'm not saying this to be rhapsodic or solicitous, but it's just painting in broad strokes. There's so much more to say, so many things you're involved in, and the impact you've had, which is why, at Regulatory Ramblings, we like to take a step back and get people to reflect on their origins, how they started. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Where are you from? Where'd you grow up? What's we know about a little bit about your professional background, but how did you end up on the path you're on?
So I'm Vietnamese, born in France. So I grew up in France, actually, studied in France, engineering schools, did 2 engineering schools, one which is Polytechnique, the other one, Ponts et Chaussées. So if you're French, you would know those 2 schools. After that, I went to the US and I studied at MIT. That was eye-opening, and that changed a lot of the way I thought. Because at MIT, so MIT is an amazing, amazing university, of course, but I did a program which is called TPP.
The best and brightest.
There's a lot of very, very good universities in the world, but MIT for me is really special, pretty much because of the way it changed my way of thinking. Because before MIT, I was already an engineer, so scientific background, certain way of thinking. Then I went to TPP, Technology and Policy Program, and basically the foundation of TPP is very simple, is that as engineers and scientists, we tend to see the world in, let's call that, black and white. 2 + 2 is always 4. Cannot be anything else than 4. It can be either true or false. But that's one of the reasons why engineers sometimes have no issues really making a big impact in the world, because the world is not black and white. It's gray, it's green, pink, red, whatever it is, or it might not even have no colors. And so TPP is really about making sure that people who tend to be very structured in their way of thinking can actually try to think more about the impact of what they do. And so from there, I moved into entrepreneurship. So I started a company called UKB. UKB was LinkedIn, but 5 years before LinkedIn. So very, very wrong timing. Learned a lot about the importance of timing in entrepreneurship or in life in general. We were lucky. We got an exit for UKB. It was more luck than anything else. It was in the US. It was in New York. Moved to London and fell into banking, pretty much by chance or coincidence. I didn't think of going into banking at all. I was going to move into telecoms, actually. And I just met Jean-Pierre Mussier. Jean-Pierre Mussier was the CEO of SocGen, Société Générale, the investment bank of SocGen. And he said, why don't you join banking? You're going to love it. It's very entrepreneurial. I knew nothing about banking. I said, why not? I moved into banking. That's where I learned everything about banking. I knew nothing. On my first day in the bank, the person who was supposed to mentor me said, okay, so just sit down and set up your Bloomberg and then we'll talk. And I asked him, what is Bloomberg? So I had no idea of what banking was.
That's amazing. So you'd never used a Bloomberg terminal up until that point?
I didn't even know what a Bloomberg terminal was. No, I came from engineering and and internet. So banking was really far from from my world. And so after that, I spent more than a decade in banking, SocGen, RBS, Citi, which I really loved. I really loved mainly for 2 reasons. First, amazing team. So I worked with pretty much on the same team at SocGen, RBS, and Citi. So really, really good people that I worked with. But the other thing is about in finance, there's something which is quite special compared to a lot of other industries, which is that you have a lot of data. And if you have a good way at looking at this data, you can almost, perhaps, to a tiny bit, anticipate the future. And this is the part that I really loved, which is being able to predict the future by having a good understanding of history. And so, for example, the crisis of 2008, we did anticipate the crisis of 2008. We did have models that said it's very likely that we will enter into a crisis of unimaginable proportion. So that, for example, was from some of the models that we had. So that was really, really interesting. So more than a decade in banking, which I really, really loved. That was my day job. And on top of that, I had my night job, and my night job was in fintech. So that's pretty much my background. So Vietnamese, French, born in France, have lived in Europe, in the US, and worked in Europe, US, Middle East, and Asia. That's pretty much who I am.
I was struck by what you said about MIT years ago. As you know, MIT is in Cambridge and across the river, Charles River from Harvard. And years ago, one of my mentors who attended MIT said, "You guys think you're going to go out there and make a big impact on the world, create these great innovations and inventions, and leave your mark on humanity and secure your place in history. More than likely, what's going to happen, you're going to be working for someone, and your manager is going to be someone from Harvard or Yale."
I do remember, all of the discussions we had at MIT and this friendly, competition between MIT and Harvard.
But to your point about engineers, what I like about engineers is they look at systems, they take them apart, as I see it, and they look at what works and what doesn't. And so there's a no-nonsense approach that engineers bring. But the trouble I find is if your point is, does it work, does it not work, that's very black and white. That's binary thinking. The real world operates on shades of gray, because in the real world you've got politics, you've got lobbying, you've got vested interests that may not necessarily want a system to work completely efficiently. So I don't know, sometimes I see the best efforts of engineers being thwarted, or those that bring that engineering mindset. But of course, it makes a difference, right? I mean, you look at China, most of their politicians have engineering backgrounds. You look at the US, most of their politicians have legal backgrounds. That brings a different mindset, a different approach to problem solving and tackling challenges. But before we get into the book, could you tell me a bit more about what compelled you to start CFTE? What the drive was? I mean, what was the seed that germinated, that prompted you to want to go down that path and say, this is something we need to do for the profession, for financial services?
Yeah, so that was a progression more than anything else. So I told you I had a night job in fintech while I was in banking, and my night job was really around two things. One which was teaching, and the other one which was through the accelerator. So I was quite involved in fintech. Through the accelerator, I was one of the founding partners of a supercharger that actually was in Hong Kong. So that's Janos Barbaris, who was in Hong Kong, who started Supercharger. That became the largest fintech accelerator in Asia. So from there, we could clearly see what was the impact of fintech and fintech startups. And the other one was teaching. I was the first fintech resident expert at Oxford. And the reason why it started is that I met Peter Tufano, who was the dean of Oxford Said Business School, an incredible person. And I told him that, because we hire a lot of people at Citi, I said, the people who come into Citi, the new graduates, the MBAs, they know finance, but not finance from today, but finance from 10 years ago. And the world has really changed. So today they should really understand what is finance and the way it has transformed with technology. And he said, why don't you do something about it? That's when I joined Oxford. We launched all the first fintech lectures, electives, the Oxford Fintech program, which was their first online course. That was amazing. People really enjoyed it. There was a lot of interest.
If I may quickly add, there's been strong interest in it from Hong Kong as well. In fact, I've known multiple people that have done it, and they say, I mean, for whatever it was, the £3,000 they spent.
Yep.
That was the best money well spent. It was, they got that amount, if not more, in returns in terms of the knowledge and the context they made, how it opened their minds up to vistas that they previously could not imagine and were afraid of, because some people are afraid of getting into technical subjects.
Yeah, I'm really glad. No, thanks a lot for the feedback. No, that made my day. It's always great to see this kind of of impact. So so that's what we saw from the Oxford fintech program. But of course, in that case, it was £3,000. There were some much more expensive. Also, not everybody can afford this kind of program, and that's why we launched with Traman, my co-founder. We launched CFT with the objective of education at scale, because the reality is that in the world of today, everybody should have a good understanding of technology to be able to thrive in their careers. So everybody, it doesn't matter where you are, what kind of background you have, what kind of money you have, you should be able to have access to this kind of knowledge. That's the reason why we launched CFT, with the objective of having everybody have access to very, very good knowledge, because now knowledge can be disseminated everywhere around the world. So that's why we started with the objective of how can we make an impact on a lot of people on this topic, which is, or on this, let's call that intersection, which is finance, technology, and entrepreneurship. So that's really the three pillars that we have, and that's why we started CFT now 7 years ago.
You have a long perspective. I think you remember the age, perhaps before the current phase of digital finance. And I think when the history of this time is written, 2009 will be an important year in the history of mankind because of the paper that Satoshi Nakamoto released and the genie that let out of the bottle. Was there a moment of epiphany or an aha moment that caused you to think, okay, fintech and crypto needs further study, it needs further consideration, it is the wave of the future? How do I situate myself to be well poised to take advantage of it, be a leader in it, and educate others?
I can't remember an aha moment. However, I think your question is really interesting, because there's the question of timing, and you remember that I care a lot about timing, and this question around timing is about if something happened today, is there any reason that it would be today and not 5 years ago and not in 5 years? And I think you're really right of talking about the financial crisis.
Some ideas are spot on. Some technologies are terrific. But they, again, because of the timing, some might say they're trying to solve a problem that hasn't yet come up. Or, the idea, it will not germinate in that time because the society isn't ready for it yet.
This part around society and consumer behavior is really important. So the financial crisis had a big impact on fintech. And the main impact was about the way that people think about the financial system, because the crisis was really, really hard on a lot of people. A lot of people said, that's the fault of the institutions, the banks, the central banks, etc. And because of that, they were starting to think of, is there some alternative ways, for me to basically save my money, make payments, do other kind of things. And that's when we started to see, all the first few ways of peer-to-peer lending, for example. The first companies like TransferWise, which was about how can you send money without having to pay fees to the banks. That's what you mentioned, the white paper of Satoshi Nakamoto, for example, in 2008, 2009. So this really started at that time. When did I really start to spend time on this? It was only a few years later. And I think, in terms of the timing, so of course, I've been involved in the space for a long, long time because of my background in the internet, and after that, in finance. So that was always of interest. But for you personally, I think there needs to be a timing of you doing something to really start this journey. Otherwise, it's not very concrete. And I think for me, that was when I started my blog called Disruptive Finance. So more than a decade ago, I started this blog called Disruptive Finance, which was writing about what was the impact of technology on financial services. So it was quite broad. I didn't want to call it fintech, which a lot of people thought about fintech as being fintech startups. My view has always been that it's much, much broader than fintech startups. It's really about how the market structure, the financial system will be transformed because of technology. And so that was mainly the first moment where I had a structure to start thinking about the future of finance. So through Disruptive Finance, that's how I, for example, met Janos Barbaris, that led to Supercharged. That's how I joined the Fintech advisory group of the World Economic Forum and met Peter Tufano, for example. So that was really when it started with the blog. Since then, and in terms of timing, I tend to always be very, let's call that, skeptical about timing compared to a lot of entrepreneurs. And that's because of my previous experience. And so, for example, in the blockchain and Bitcoin is a really, really good example. I think it was in 2014 when I wrote about Bitcoin. I said, amazing, amazing innovation. What we see with Bitcoin today is really, let's call that ARPANET for the internet, which is really the first version of the internet. So we're not at the level of the internet. So it's going to take a lot of thinking, a lot of design, a lot of people coming together to start seeing the impact of this. In 2017, for example, when everybody was talking about, financial institutions will be adopting blockchain, I said, it's going to be 10 years before we see that, not because of the technology, but because the financial system in itself, whenever you want to change something, it does take time. So having a blog for me was really, really helpful to structure my ideas in the same way as here, writing a book really helps, to structure my ideas so that we can have a proper, discussion and dialogue about things that we have thought about.
Let's come to your book, the AI-fication of Jobs. You shared some of your motivation in that, and I mentioned that early on when I introduced you, but this is a space that's heavily saturated. There's no shortage of books on AI. What made you want to join the fray, and what did you feel you would add that would be novel, original, of first impression?
So it all started from CFTE and what we do at CFTE. What's our primary mission at CFTE? So it's not teaching. It's not about just giving courses or lectures or workshops to people. It's helping people thrive in a world of technology. That's really our ultimate goal. It's helping people, organizations, countries do really well in a world of technology. For that, we need to understand, what does it mean? And when we think about AI, we know the impact of AI on jobs will be humongous. But what is this impact? What are the jobs that will be created? What are the jobs that will be displaced? What are the jobs that will be enhanced? We don't really know, actually. And that's the reason why we wanted to spend time on this, which was when I look at all the research that are being done on the impact of AI on jobs, we see mainly two types of discussions. One, which is about 300 million jobs will be transformed by AI. If we think about it, do you know, for example, how many jobs were lost during the 2008 crisis?
It was the millions, I would imagine.
So yeah, it was in the millions. It was 20 million jobs globally. Oh. So we're talking about potentially an impact which is 10 times bigger than the worst crisis that we have ever seen. It doesn't make any sense for me. It doesn't make any sense in the sense of, if it's true, then in that case, all of us, all governments, all policymakers around the world should just focus on this priority right away. If it's not true, we need to understand why it's not true. But we're talking potentially about an impact which is 10 times bigger. On the other hand, we don't know how it's going to work. If you tell me 300 million jobs will be transformed, I need to understand how will they be transformed so that I can do something about it, so that I can either upskill people, reskill them, give them new jobs. It's a bit like saying the Earth is warming up and it will reach 3 degrees, but we don't understand what's this mechanism that goes from something into those 3 degrees. So this is exactly what I wanted to do, which is having a much better understanding of what is the impact of AI on jobs so that we can properly prepare for it and make the most out of this transformation that is AI, because the reality is that AI can be an amazing, amazing technology.
Much has been said about AI. It does fill people with trepidation. If you had to distill it down to 4 or 5 points, what are the key arguments, observations, conclusions you make in your book? What are the central takeaways without giving away too much? And what were your primary conclusions and observations that you walked away with?
Of course, I'd love people to buy the book, but even if they don't buy the book, hopefully, by the end of this podcast, they would have a good idea of what I'm trying to say and how it can help and impact them. Perhaps let me ask you a question. When we talk about AI and jobs, what are some of the questions you'd like to see answered in this kind of book? What would you like to know about AI and jobs?
Recurring theme on our show is, and this is a theme that I think is going to reverberate throughout the rest of the century, is that how well does your labor complement, augment the outcomes that can be attained through with AI and with automation? And if your knowledge, skills, creativity, if you work well with technology, if you're adding value in spite of what technology can produce on its own, AI or other forms of automation, then you have a place at the table. You're a high power knowledge worker who adds value. If not, well, as Professor Honor recently, this past summer, released a video clip entitled "The Rise of the AI Idiots," which is that it's his contention that over-reliance on AI in certain white-collar professions, certain knowledge worker fields, is going to lead to redundancies of workers. Because, say you're a journalist, and you take the lazy route and you get AI to write an article for you, you plug in the facts, you ask, you pose the right questions in the prompts, you get AI to write the article for you, you cleaned it up, you hand it into your editor. The editor may have a good sense of what you've done, and if that's the case, then why hire you? A journalist is supposed to bring their sense of judgment and discernment and be a curator of the facts, when I could use the AI machine myself independently to write that report, to write that piece. My sense is that AI is going to impact low-skilled white-collar workers, and if you listen to geostrategists, futurists like Peter Zeihan, that's their conclusion too, that AI is going to impact low-skilled white-collar employees more than it will blue-collar employees in the first wave. So if you're a secretary or personal assistant or a copy editor or a paralegal, you may have something to worry about. That person has more to worry about than a construction worker or a janitor or a school.
No, thanks. No, that's really interesting, and that's usually a lot of the types of questions and feedback I have, which is when we think about AI, it tends to be very personal. It tends to be very personal because it does impact us, as a person, and so we're wondering really about what kind of skills do I need myself to make sure that I can do well in the world of AI. Totally makes sense. But having this human-centric view makes sense, but limits our thinking. That was the first observation of the book. It's a bit like, for example, you remember when Amazon, when they started, competed with bookshops. It's a bit like taking the point of view of bookshops and trying to anticipate what will happen, and not taking the point of view of Amazon and Jeff Bezos to understand what will happen. So this book is about changing the perspective and not taking the perspective from the human standpoint. It's very important, of course, but to understand, I believe we need to take the perspective of the disruptor. And the disruptor in that case is artificial intelligence. So when we take the perspective of the disruptor, it makes it much more structured in terms of our thinking, because we can use innovation frameworks to understand what is the impact of technology on different areas and different sectors. Here I use a framework that I have created, which is called the CDE Innovation Prism. And the CDE Innovation Prism says that, in general, when we look at innovation, it is very complex. It is very confusing. You have millions of startups, companies doing innovation, but we can actually categorize them in 3 types of innovation, which is cheaper, better, faster, like Amazon that competed with bookshops. Different, like Facebook that created totally different types of products. And enhancing, like Salesforce that supported and enhanced the businesses with CRM, for example. If we take this kind of approach, then actually we can anticipate what will happen to AI and jobs. And there are 3 massive trends which are coming. The first one, which you mentioned, which is mass displacement. Mass displacement is coming very, very quickly because taking the point of view of the disruptor, it's about exactly, for example, in Fintech, unbundling, rebundling. Unbundling starting with very, very narrow tasks, making sure that they're cheaper, better, faster than humans. And as they expand the market from those very, very narrow tasks, they start to rebundle and do much more. So this is the first one. The second one is what I call the rise of the supercharged professionals. Those people who will do 5 times, 10 times, 100 times more by leveraging mainly 3 things. First, that domain expertise, the fact that they know a domain really, really well. Second one, technology and how they master technology to be able to supercharge that domain expertise. And the third one is lifelong learning and making sure that they continue on this cycle all the time. And then finally, the third one is the creative disruptors. This very, very, very small group of people will have a humongous impact on sectors, industries, society at large. Who are those people? Those are those, for example, OpenAI, a very, very small team. Look at the impact on all of us. Another example, Nobel Prize in Chemistry was given to AlphaFold from Google DeepMind. Demis Hassabis, what they have done, taken AI, applied it to biology, and from there, totally transformed the way that biology is being done at the moment with the predictions for the shape of proteins, for example. So we will see those 3 different types of trends. I'm quite convinced about it. In terms of the frameworks, the reasoning, the structure. We are seeing all of that happening at the moment. What's the main takeaway? The main takeaway is that I think we have 2 futures to think of. There's one future where what I would call the cost of inaction, which is if we don't do anything, and I'll tell you, what I mean by the we, then we are moving into a world where mass displacement will be massive. Why? Because on average, we're all average, which now I think all scientists and engineers would agree with. But AI today is better than the average. You can look at all the exams, tests, tasks, etc. On AI is better than the average on a lot of different tasks. Taking the view of the disruptor, which are the AI companies, then the cheaper, better, faster strategy is very, very, very clear. We have seen it already. Companies like Klarna, for example, who saved $40 million, but by having 700 fewer people in customer service. We're seeing it everywhere around the world. So that's the cost of inaction, which is some people will do really, really well, supercharged professionals. Some people will have an outsized impact on society, the creative disruptors. We might see incredible breakthrough in biology, in education, etc. The problem is that we will have mass displacement, so not everybody can benefit from this. The second option for our future, this is what I called a world of collective abundance, is that in reality, we're moving into a world of abundance of inputs, like in the way as electricity gave an abundance of energy, now we're having an abundance of cognitive power. We can solve things that we could never solve before. some of the biggest problems that we have in the world, hunger, climate change, water, all of those issues, potentially we have an abundance of cognitive power that can help us to solve them. The only objective, but also challenge today, is how do we make sure that it is collective, that it is shared, and not just for a very, very small number of people. And this is really the conclusion of the book, which is that we know those trends. They are very, very powerful trends. This is the impact that technology has on different sectors. We have seen it for a long, long time. People can look at the frameworks, we can discuss about it, but those are very, very powerful trends which are happening. How can we make sure that we can leverage that to our benefit and don't move into a future where we will see mass displacement for a lot of people? And here I have recommendations for 3 different types of stakeholders. Those 3 stakeholders are first and foremost every one of us. What do we need to do? The second one are policymakers, regulators, those who have an impact on society. And the third one who are business leaders, those who are driving change and transformation within the organizations. And that's how I finished the book, with very clear recommendations on what we should do. But one of the first recommendations is make sure that you're part of the discussion. Make sure that you don't just let the discussion being driven by others and believe that it will be okay. It will not be okay if not all of us are being part of the discussion.
Hearing you say that, there's so many things that come to mind. And frankly, the world we live in sounds more like the dystopian scenario you painted first, which is that there'll be displacement, some will do well, and sadly, in my view, that means that those rewards, the remuneration, the benefits will accrue to that small group that does well. I mean, the simple, as you put it, on average, we're all average. AI produces better results than the average person. Okay, I mean, there's that Reaganite quote from President Reagan. There are simple answers, just no easy answers. Okay, the simple answer is everyone needs to raise their game and be above average. The hard part is how. People need to find their niche, where they're better than a computer, where they're better than AI. But again, how? I mean, that is the challenge. And then you think back to what the technologists of the 1950s were saying, and that dovetails with your point about collective abundance. Back then, they were saying mankind will enjoy the benefits of technology. We'll only work a few hours a week. That there'll be great widespread abundance, and the technology held the promise of tomorrow. Didn't quite work out that way, but I mean, the technologists of the 50s got some things right. It didn't work out that way in some ways because, well, once you introduce computers and word processing, that meant people could type up more reports. Okay, and if you typed up more reports had to be read by supervisors and managers. So again, more time was lost in that regard. More work had to be done. I don't know what the future holds, but I mean, clearly upskilling, retooling, and lifelong learning is going to be the order of the day, even though some people seem to think, I learn what I need to in school and the rest I'll learn on the job. But I think people really need to invest in themselves, because you can't always rely on your employer to give you the skills and the training you need to continue to be relevant at your job.
I think you definitely, have this part on reskilling, upskilling, which is really important. And there are different levels of answers, I would say. That's why I broke it down for us as individuals, policymakers, and business leaders. In an ideal world, all of us, would get more skills, would learn by ourselves, and would do really well. The reality is that it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. You can't have hundreds of millions of people who are very busy with their lives, who don't know what they need to learn, who will just go and find a course and do really well, with that course. So we know that it's not going to happen. That's why, but the answer also has to be at the level of policymakers and industry leaders. But you're totally right that for us individually, I think we have two objectives. My view is that for me, as a person, I would have two objectives. The first one, I want to be a supercharged professional, which I think I am being a supercharged professional. It took me 10 months to write this book. The reality is that without AI, it would have taken me so much longer. I think I would have never finished the book actually. At CFTE, I think a lot of the people at CFTE are becoming supercharged professional. They are so much faster, create so much more content of good quality, for example, than a few years ago. So I think for all of us individually is how do I become a supercharged professional to make sure that I can do really, really well in my job. And so supercharged professional, just as a reminder, that's not just about using technology. Supercharged professional is having a really good domain expertise. That's a really, really big asset to have, which is knowing an industry really well, understanding how it works, and combine that with technology. And on top of that, lifelong learning to make sure that all your skills are always updated. So that is definitely, I think, the main approach for individuals. But to make a real impact, I think that's really the role of policymakers. And since HKU is really, really good on the regulatory side, this is not the topic of this podcast. I just realized, it took me a while, but I just realized that, for example, when we talk about some industries like finance or health, those are very, very regulated industries. Of course, if a bank goes down, that's really bad for society. That's why we have central banks with thousands of people who would regulate the banking system. There's two takeaways from there. First is that as a society, there are some sectors that we regulate. But the second one is that as society, we have a very, very good knowledge and expertise in certain domains like finance or drugs or medicine, for example. Let's think about technology. Technology, I think, is the biggest driver of all the things that we do, perhaps even more than finance, perhaps even more than health. If you think of what happened with CrowdStrike a few months ago, when CrowdStrike went down, pretty much the whole world went down. No flights, were on the ground. Some of the banks couldn't distribute money. So technology, biggest impact on the world. Do we have any technology regulator? Not really. Do we have a good understanding of technology at the level of government? Not really. So there's a big, big, big gap in terms of domain expertise in technology for government and policymakers. I think that's a gap that we need to fill very, very quickly. So that's one for policymakers. The second one is let's put human back in the loop. If we look at all regulations around the world, across all the different regulators, supervisors, is there anyone who has a mandate to think of human jobs? Nobody. We only think of human jobs when they're unemployed. Once people are unemployed, then in that case, we think about what kind of benefits we should give them, or we think about how can we try to give them another job. But there's no one thinking about human employment. And so I think there's some of those change in mindset which are really important at the policymaker level that we need to do. Because if we're really talking about hundreds of millions of jobs which will be impacted, which is 10 times worse than the worst crisis that we have ever seen, we need to think about it before so that we can shape the future and not after once we have the issue.
I think what CFTE is doing is laudable, largely because, as we alluded to earlier, there is a financial, socioeconomic class aspect to it as well. That there is a financial inclusion angle to it as well. That you should be able to get that training and learn what you need to be a productive member of society, irrespective of socioeconomic class, irrespective of your means, because there is a belief that society as a whole benefits from you being educated and having those skills. Particularly the fact that CFTE is expanding its footprint in the Middle East, particularly Dubai and Abu Dhabi. And I was fortunate to attend your event back in May at the Museum of the Future. And my sense is there's a real hunger to learn there. And maybe that might have been part of your reason for focusing on that region. But why the Middle East? And what are your expectations? What do you think are the prospects of that region? Because they honestly, when the Hong Kong government delegation went over, this was in connection with the Hong Kong Fintech Association last year, not this year. My understanding is the government officials were in awe of how far Dubai had come in the fintech crypto space, and I could sympathize with where that government official was coming from, because I've been visiting Dubai since April of '89, and there was a time when they looked up to places like Hong Kong and Singapore. Dubai wasn't anything much. And then, lo and behold, all of a sudden, it was a dark horse, and it pulled up in front of Hong Kong and Singapore by creating the VARA, the Virtual Asset Regulatory Authority. And then I guess what I'm wondering is, what is your interest in the UAE and then the GCC and the Middle East more broadly, writ large?
So I wish I could tell you that it started from a grand plan and strategy that
no grand schemes.
But so I'm currently calling from Abu Dhabi. So I'm currently in our office in Abu Dhabi. But I wish I could tell you, but it wasn't the case. Like a lot of things, for CFC and for startups in general, it's serendipity. It's about meeting people. And a few years ago, we had the chance to meet with ADGM, Abu Dhabi Global Markets Academy, amazing institution. And they were looking for a partner in fintech and artificial intelligence. That's when we started working with them. And from there, we expanded and did much more. What I love about the region is that they are very, very mission driven. We as an organization are also very, very mission driven. But in the region, whether it's in the UAE or it's in Saudi or other countries in the region, they have a very, very clear vision of where they want to go. And as part of this, how having a highly educated workforce is important for the future of their countries. That's very, very big picture, but I wouldn't neglect this kind of vision, so that everybody is aligned on what they're trying to achieve. And that's the reason why we're very involved here. And that's the reason why we enjoy working with all the different stakeholders, because we all have the same objectives. Which is, how do we get there in terms of having a highly educated workforce? It's not easy. It's not simple. There are a lot of challenges. How do you do it at scale for very, very different types of backgrounds and what kind of jobs? So it's not easy. But when you have a set objectives and a clear long-term vision, it makes it so much easier. So that's the reason why we're here. And you mentioned about how the region has grown over the last few years. That's really true. We saw it during COVID. I think it really started at the beginning of COVID. With COVID, they accelerated a lot. They moved online very quickly, so they adapted really, really quickly. They leveraged on this online part, so that accelerated the transformation of digital skills, of getting people to learn in different ways.
If I may chime in real quickly,
yeah,
they made e-government a reality.
Yeah, definitely. So Hong Kong, I think, is different. I would say. Because we've been involved in Hong Kong for a long time, with HKU, supercharged. So it's been 10 years now. So I think I have quite a good idea of how Hong Kong works. The Middle East tends to be much more top down. So it starts from a vision at the top and it cascades down. Whereas Hong Kong tends to be much more bottom up. I would say so. It's much more business driven, and it's entrepreneur driven. It's everybody comes together and gets things done. So I think it's different in terms of the approach, and in different types of environments. In an environment like COVID, for example, where basically you say, no, we're just going to do it and everybody does the same, then that allows to accelerate perhaps a bit faster.
AI is a force that we're stuck with. It's here. Best learn how to use it, harness it. But the dangers that are endemic to it, deep fakes, the potential for fraud, the potential for malfeasance, that too is concerning, and it's off-putting to people, and so that's why some people don't want to use it. The other concern is some vendors have said, certainly in the AML financial crime space, vendors don't necessarily want to hear about AI solutions, because even though some salespeople want to brag about the AI component of what they're offering, because the concern is, okay, I'm feeding my data, my proprietary information into this AI. Is there a record being kept? Who's listening or who's paying attention on the other end? Will it come back to haunt me later on? These are problems. These are questions for which there are no easy answers.
Perhaps just to take a step back, I think those are all very, very legitimate concerns. So I've been involved in AI quite deeply since 2018, since we created this first certification of AI in finance with CFTE and Ngân Polytechnic in Singapore. So I've been really, really involved in the space. At that time, what I said was AI, single most important technology impacting our industry, or all industries. So of course, I still believe that it's by far the most important technology. I'm very optimistic, I would say, about the positive impact that AI can have. I gave the example of AlphaFold. I think there's some sectors like biology where we will see incredible breakthrough on, for example, disease that we couldn't cure before in terms of how do we manage our health. I think we can see incredible breakthrough on education, for example. How can I make sure that hundreds of millions of people can have a personalized education, almost having a tutor in front of them, things that we cannot do. So incredible breakthrough. But all the concerns that you mentioned are 100% right. And I think they really translate two different things. One, which is a lot of people are fearful, they're afraid of AI, which I understand. They're afraid of AI will do things which are bad for me, or of course people on the job side are thinking about AI will replace me, or it's will be out of control, etc. So that makes sense.
And this is not just knowledge workers. We saw this last year with the Hollywood strike. There was a genuine fear that AI has reached such a level that now actors, extras, might be replaced. That one could have a property interest in one's likeness, and they could sell it. And the studios, for their part, were not willing to acquiesce completely.
No, the answer for me has always been AI is too important to be left to the engineers. Which is, today, we, as a society, in general, we just leave it to the engineers, or just, let's call that, a few companies, 5 companies in the world to shape our future. It shouldn't be. And so that means, for all of us, if we're talking about, for example, in a system of compliance, in a bank, it shouldn't just be, the data scientist who creates this system. It should be, every single person who's being involved and understands this, from the compliance officers to legal, to some of the other support functions. For example, every single person should be able to understand and be involved in those kind of discussions. So I would say very reasonable. We're seeing all of those changes happening very, very quickly, and we don't understand that. We need to move away from fear and move away from, let's call that, being passive into being active. And the first step is really first, understand what's happening. Make sure that, you're at the same level as others in terms of knowing the vocabulary, understanding the technology, understanding, if we talk about deepfake, how do you do a deepfake? I could show you how can do a deepfake in 3 minutes. Once you understand this, And actually, you're less fearful about deepfake because you can understand how people will do them, what's the process behind, what are some of the things that could tell you that it's more or less a deepfake, etc. So I think understanding and raising your knowledge so that you are on par with what's happening in the industry would be a very good first step.
Your point's well taken that it should not be left up to engineers and data scientists. That's certainly the rationale behind the EU AI Act that went into effect this past summer. That they recognize that there are multiple stakeholders that are impacted by this, and certainly the position of the Indian and Chinese governments has been major governments, I think, around the world are going to pretty much follow this approach to some degree. That AI must not be allowed to take on a life of its own. This is not a matter in which you can just say, let the market decide, let private actors do with it as they will, because the downside is potentially too dangerous.
100% agree. AI technology in general is such an important part of our society that it shouldn't just have its life on its own. So 100% agree. What's the answer? So one of my answers would be, for example, something like a technology regulator that has two benefits. One is regulation. Although not being a regulator, I'm not always a big fan of regulating everything, but in some cases like this, it does make sense to have regulation. So I think technology regulator could be one of the answers. It could be in other shapes and forms, but I think having some kind of regulation for technology is important. In the same way as we have regulations for finance, we have regulations for medicine and other critical sectors. But the second most important impact by far is knowledge, is making sure that us as society do have a very, very, very deep knowledge on technology and AI, which is not the case. We do have in financial services. Anything happens in financial services, we have hundreds of people in government, in central banks, in regulators who have a very, very good understanding of what's happening, even though sometimes better than the industry. It should be the same for technology so that we can properly drive technology for our own benefit.
As you reflect on your banking experience, do you think AI is going to lead to job losses in the compliance space? I mean, again, my area of expertise is AML, financial crime, but I've heard both arguments. But a compelling argument that I've heard is that it's not inconceivable that AI is going to mean fewer money laundering reporting officers. It's going to lead to a shrinking of your junior analysts, your middle management people, and that pretty soon you may as well just have a data scientist running your financial crime compliance team, because it's going to be about using AI, using algorithms to machine learning and large language models to go through large troves of data and discern patterns and excise actionable intelligence. At least that's the direction they claim things are going. And of course, the counter argument is you can't replace investigative skills accumulated on the ground over a lifetime with a machine, with an algorithm.
The reality, we talk about compliance. There are, in some banks you have more than 10,000 people working in compliance. Will it be cheaper, better, faster, where there's going to be AI basically competing with people, or will it be more enhancing, where it will be AI supporting people? My view is that in banks, you will see both. You will see some activities which are, I would call that less business critical, where it will be cheaper, better, faster, where you will see AI competing with people, and some activities which tend to be even more complex or more critical because they are regulatory driven or big impact on the customer, where AI will enhance people. So I think you're likely to see both. However, in terms of the mechanism, because you talk more specifically about banks, where will you see the transformation? You will first see the transformation not in the banks. You will first see the transformation in those organizations which are much more nimble, agile, faster, smaller, which have fewer resources. That's the reason why you're starting to see a lot of those transformation in startups. You could take hundreds of examples of startups that have started to transform their workforce. Why? Mainly because they are faster, so they can implement tomorrow if they wanted to. But of course, they also do not have the legacy and the reputational issues that the large organizations would face. So you're likely to see a process which will be longer for the large organizations, except perhaps for some of those activities which are easy to replace with AI, those activities which are quite well structured already. For example, those which are currently being outsourced. Today, if you're outsourcing some of your activities, you already have all the process in place, all the guidelines, the rule books, etc. It's much easier actually to start from this kind of activities, also because the reputational impact is likely to be less than saying, for example, we will have 10% fewer employees in our bank.
A lot remains to be seen, but I mean, honestly, I do think the days of overstaffed bank branches are over. How far you can go in the direction of cutting stuff, I guess we'll see. Because I mean, the counter argument is banks get too greedy in the direction of automation, and then lo and behold, some Iran sanction or Russia sanction slips through the net, and then that's an awkward conversation to have with the regulator, because then they'll say, you went too far in the direction of cutting to the bone, and had you had one or two more human analysts or MLROs on site, someone may pick that up, because every algorithm works until it doesn't, and then you're backpedaling, you're engaging in apologetics and hoping the regulator doesn't take too harsh an enforcement action against you. But this has been most insightful. In the time we've got left, is there anything else you'd like to say? Any points you'd like to leave us with?
Thanks a lot, Ajay. Definitely, I think if I'd like to give you with a few takeaways from my 10 months of research on this topic, it is that there are some trends which are coming, actually, which are happening at the moment. Some you might not see because they're under the surface, but they're happening, and they're very, very strong trends. And those three trends are mass displacement. There will be entire categories of jobs that are likely to be replaced by AI. The second one is the rise of the supercharged professionals, those people who will do incredibly well because they will combine that domain expertise with how they can use technology. And there will be a very, very small group of people who will have an outsized impact on all of us, the creative disruptors, those who can reinvent the whole industries or build new ones. So those trends are happening. And that's really not up for us to make a choice on how we see all this abundance being shared or not. If we don't do anything, then we know that AI could have some really positive impact in a lot of different sectors. The issue is that a lot of people will be without a job. So we need to make sure that this abundance is being properly shared, that it becomes a collective abundance. And for that, there's really a role for each of us. There's a role for us as individuals. So your first duty, I think, is to become a supercharged professional and to do really well. But I think your second duty is also to be making sure that you're part of the discussion. Make sure that you're, let's call that, an advocate for humanity. And that leads to the role which is critical of the policymakers, those who can shape society. For them, my biggest advice by far is be part of the discussion. Make sure that you're at the same level of knowledge as those driving this today, which are the tech companies. Make sure you're not 5 levels lower, but at the same level, and be sure that you drive this discussion. And the third one is for the industry leaders. The obvious choice for a lot of industry leaders is cheaper, better, faster. I will augment my profit by having fewer people and replacing them with AI. That makes totally economic sense. It doesn't make sense for society, but also it doesn't make sense for you as a business in the long term. Because a business is not just about efficiency until there's nothing else to do. A business is about growing new ideas, innovation, new products, new ways of working with your clients. And how do you do it without the right people and without the right culture? So the short-term solution seems really obvious, but make sure that you do focus on the long term. And for that, that's really about you shaping the culture of your organization. So I would leave you on with that. Like the example that I had, which is, you asked me what was my aha moment. I couldn't really remember the aha moment. The only thing I remembered is that I started something, which is I started my blog. I think for all of you, if you want to, in 10 years, come back and say, what was your aha moment? Do something, start something, whatever it is. Whether it's starting a course or launching a discussion within your organization, or if you're in a regulator, having a working group on something. Start something, and I assure you, you will not regret it in the future.
We thank you so much for your time.
Thanks a lot, Ajay. It's been a real pleasure.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us. Until next time.